Hey everyone, thanks for watching today. I have a really special guest with me today, Tom Nardone. How you doing today, Tom?
Hey, I'm doing great, Michael. Thanks
E-
for having me on the show.
Excellent. Thank you for being on. I think you're really going to enjoy his story because he comes at it from kind of a humble beginnings, if you will, and really shows that when you do it long term, success happens. So we'll peel that back together here in a minute. But why don't we start with what's keeping you busy today, Tom?
Busy today. Probably the classic three is buy and holding and fix and flipping and a little bit of wholesaling.
Okay.
Mainly those three. And I do a fair amount of coaching too, one-on-one coaching.
Yes, we're definitely going to peel back that coaching because I've looked you up and seen some of the stuff you've done. So we'll definitely get into the coaching aspects. But why don't we just talk
Sure.
about the portfolio today? Because a lot of people that watch my channel are probably on the newer side of real estate investing. So why don't we break down? Why don't we just start how you did? Buy and hold was what you talked about first. So what does buy and hold look like for you? Is it houses, multifamilies? What does it look like for Tom?
It started out, I started out back in the 80s with some guidance from Jimmy Napier, one of the old time educators in this business, along with several others I can mention. But he taught me a combination of single family homes and mobile homes.
Ah,
So yeah, my end game was always to have a fair amount of mobile homes and just single family properties. To me, I see a mobile home as almost a single family home. It doesn't tend to really make much difference. In fact, they cash flow great here in South Florida where I'm at. So depending on where you live too,
yeah.
there's Florida's a state with many different markets within it.
Sure.
So
Why don't
that's my game, though, is buy and hold.
Very cool. So why don't we just, because we haven't had anybody to date talk about mobile homes, why don't we just break down really what it is? They're often affixed. They come with land. Why don't we talk about what that is in your world, just to educate everybody on what a mobile home looks like for you.
Yeah, sure. In my area, and specifically, I'm actually not too far from Miami, about 30 miles away. The Fort Lauderdale, Boca Raton market is where I am, and there's a fair amount of mobile homes down here. And they've been sort of discouraged over the last few decades as we get hurricanes that sometimes tear apart. they the older ones from back in the 60s and 70s, there's still some of those around, but a lot of them have gotten damaged by storms over the years. And today the newer ones they make are very, very strong. These wind zone 3 homes, they call them, are constructed really rough and tough. So I actually live in in a little town called Parkland here, which is next to Boca Raton. But Boca Raton, believe it or not, has some mobile home subdivisions within it that you could buy a home at a very good price, and the ROI on that rent is like crazy. I mean, we could rent these homes for $1,500 a month for a mobile home.
Wow. Yeah,
So yeah,
makes a lot of sense.
yeah, if you could buy it under 100,000 and rent it for 1,500 a month, how can you argue with that type of return?
No, those are very good numbers. It doesn't really matter if it's called a mobile home or sticks and bricks. So I think that makes a
Right.
lot of sense. And I also like the idea. Sounds like came from the 80s for you of just, there's nothing wrong with a single residence, whether that be a single family home or a mobile home, right? They're often easiest to rent. They often stay the longest. You don't have that kind of churn you do in multifamily. So is that true in your world as well?
Yeah, pretty much. If it's in a good neighborhood and it's not, one of the, a quote unquote trailer park that
Yeah.
everybody thinks of with, beer fights going on every night and people, the cops visiting the neighborhood every day. There's no gunshots going off. I mean, these are nicer mobile home areas. And for the most part of it, they're not really mobile home parks. They're
Right.
mobile home subdivisions. So,
Ah,
you own the land with it. So people tend to view it as a house, even though it's just a simple like Band-Aid lot, which as a landlord I love because it's less grass to mow. It's not like it sits on an acre or something if I were to go out into rural parts of Florida, which we do have a lot of those too.
right, right. Very cool. So, I think that makes a lot of sense. People watching this are all over the country and some folks even around the world. So, what you just said there about owning the land, I think that's the wrinkle, right? You don't want to have somebody else sort of sublet the land where you're essentially cutting them an HOA check or whatever you would call that. It's owning the land. And then, okay, so a mobile home goes on it. So what versus, foundation and pour and all of that. So, I think that makes a lot of sense. Um,
Sure.
what
Sure.
about, so what about flipping? What does flipping look like for you? Is that still mobile homes, or are you doing other things?
No, flipping is more the fix and flip
Yep.
business is more of, going to a neighborhood where you can still buy a house at a reasonable price. And I like to say 50 or 60 cents on a dollar, and
Ah, wow.
not much more than that. So, we market to find our own deals. We don't rely on other wholesalers to find our deals. So, we have the ability to buy straight from the sellers. And I think if you go to smaller towns, which, once you get away from that coastal edge of Florida that goes all around Florida, and you get away from that, Florida gets really country really fast,
Hmm.
especially once you get north of Orlando. So there's little sub-markets within Florida that, you can go into a little town, pick whatever one you want to work in, and you could be the king of that town, because a lot of those towns don't have much competition. Whereas the coastal towns like Fort Lauderdale, Miami, Palm Beach, I own property there and I've worked there for decades, but there's a lot of competition there right now. So we're not afraid to drive into other markets where we could find deals at lower cost pricing.
So again, I think there's some words of wisdom right there that I want to make sure people get, and that is, you don't always have to go to the, the headline markets, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, those folks. There's nothing wrong with a secondary market, right? Rents may be slightly less. Your days of, vacancy might be slightly more because maybe there's just less people. But my experience with secondary markets is tenants, once they're there, they stay longer. It's not the,
Yeah,
it's not the churn of a bigger city. So um,
right.
I
I
think
mean,
that,
once you probably the biggest hurdle there might be that you can't bring your fix-up guys with you,
ah,
really. You know, I mean, some of them I can, like the kitchen guy for me, who will do all the bathroom vanities and all the kitchens and the countertops. He's willing to travel and he'll drive a couple hours to do a job. But for the painter, the electrician, the local guys, you just got to develop local people in that market, and
yeah.
make friends with them, and and then it goes pretty smooth once you find the right contractors.
Yeah. You've said it a couple of times, but I want to make sure I don't assume anything. It seems like your market that you invest in, both, 80s on, is all within driving distance. Is that fair?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I would say we just closed on a house. It's here we are a couple days after Christmas, but on Christmas Eve we just closed on the exit of a property over in Punta Gorda, Florida, which is about it's probably about 2.5 hours for me.
Okay.
But I love driving through the Everglades. I'm kind of a Florida redneck from New Jersey, if you can figure that out.
Yeah.
Other than that, no, I'm a Florida redneck. On the weekends, I have an airboat. I go out in the Everglades, alligator hunting, and all that
Wow.
fun stuff.
That's
Yeah,
awesome. All right. So
but
go ahead.
I like driving the back roads of Florida, is what I want to say. So to drive 2.5 hours, to me, it's just an adventure. And when I get to these lower cost towns, we look around while we're there. Just check on the crew, make sure they're doing all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Why not?
yeah,
That's awesome. And then you said also you market, finding your own motivated sellers, or sort of marketing direct. I never want to assume. So is that you're just doing mailers, or you kind of door knocking, or cold calling, all the above, none of the above?
actually all the above. Yeah.
Okay.
If we see something that looks distressed, write it down, track it down.
Yeah.
If we call somebody and they're in distress, off of the certain lists we have two virtual assistants that call and cold call
Okay.
specific lists. And then we would do direct mail. Direct mail still works. And,
Yeah.
my mailman background, I come from mail. So
Yeah.
kind of, addicted to mail.
I want to make sure we get into that when we talk about your origin story. So then the last piece you went through, so buy and hold, fix and flip, and was wholesaling. It seems like, I guess, why would you choose to wholesale something? Is it just, inventory or time, or why would you wholesale anything?
Well, I'm a pretty low employee operation. It's pretty much me, and I have a bookkeeper, and I have one virtual assistant who kind of helps me administratively
Yeah.
do things, and then I have the two that do the cold calling. So I pretty much let the two VAs that are doing the cold calling, because they don't live here, they live in other countries.
Yeah.
They pretty much set the appointment, and then if they can get the appointment set, I know it's worthy of going on because I know they're not as good as me. So if they can get the seller to be proficient enough to tell that there's equity in the property, and they can discern that there's motivation to sell on behalf of the seller, and they can actually get the appointment with them, then it's worthy for me to go. And
Okay.
I would say 9 out of 10 times we get it under contract.
That's great. And like when you look at all three of those, are you, I don't know, 50 transactions a year, 20? I mean, it seems like
No, not near that. I mean, in a way lower deal.
Okay.
I mean, where and you know, I can scale this, but it's not really my main focus. I do this to stay current in the market, and I have
Yep.
coaching students as well. So as far as the volume, I have about 2 fix and flips at a time that we do, not a
Okay.
high volume operation. So I figure if I can, you know, make about a $50,000 profit off of each house and do 4 to 6 of those a year, and then, you know, we have buy and hold properties, which
Yep.
are paid for. And then we have other students that we work with. And the students in the coaching program, they also a lot of times come back to us with deals that they don't know how to do themselves. So
Yep.
we'll partner on those. So it becomes a marketing platform as well as a education platform.
Yeah. The deal flow that comes from education is is certainly a nice plus.
Yeah.
You know, having done that
It
myself.
is.
So why don't we talk about the coaching? I think we're there. We'll get into your origin story next, but talk about what you're doing coaching. Is it one-on-one? Is it, you know, you do 2 a year? What does coaching look like for you, Tom?
Yeah, coaching looks like for me is I've done a lot over the years as far as having you know, my own information products, and I've spoke the RIA Club circuit really fairly heavy about 10 to 15 years ago. And I don't even know that business model really exists anymore, but I did, you know, travel the country doing all these speaking gigs from small stages wherever RIA clubs exist. And that's kind of morphed into me working with a couple different national people over the last decade or so that are gurus that have a lot of student flow. And then I kind of act as an outsourced coaching mechanism for them to one-on-one mentor their students. So that's kind of where that's taken me. Right now, I probably have about maybe 25 or 30 students that I work with one-on-one.
Yeah.
And it's been good. I've enjoyed it. So
Yeah. I find now giving back and helping someone get started is, I get more excitement out of them getting their first deal than, you know, me doing another deal. It's the scale is just so much different. Yeah.
it is. It's very rewarding to see someone else discover this business and then, you know, get launched and make their first deal, make a profit. And a lot of times those students aren't even in Florida. They could be in another state.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's so you get to spread yourself out, and you also get to ask a student to do something which you know will work in your market. You ask them to try it in theirs, and then you get to actually see the results.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, you get to say, hey, try this, and I'll bet you this will work well for you where you're at. And then you kind of get to pencil all these notes about, wow, this worked in this city and that state, and this city and that state. And I've literally done that with, I'd say over the last 5 years, I've probably coached about 600 students.
Wow.
So I know pretty much any pocket of the country where the numbers work and where they work best.
Very, very cool. Well, let's flip back to your origin story, because I again, I looked it up. It's very intriguing. So why don't we share with everyone how you got started in this business?
Sure. It's you know, as I said, I'm here in South Florida. Came from New Jersey. I moved down here when I was just 19 years old, and I got a job with the post office. So right away, they put me on a beach route here in Fort Lauderdale, where I'm driving around Fort Lauderdale Beach, delivering mail. You know, I was 19 years old. I was kind of, you know, like, you're kidding me. They pay me for this? And, you know, I would have done this for free practically. And so then I met my wife there at the Postal Service, and she lasted a few years, but she helped me to realize that there's much more in store for our lives together than you being a mailman. So I figured, all right, how can I take this job and turn it into an asset that will actually, help me get started in some kind of career that actually means something. And it was lucky I came across Jack Miller. I mentioned Jimmy Napier earlier, but it was really Jimmy Napier, Jack Miller, and John Schaub. Those were some of my my early mentors, and Pete Fortunato, who's still around today and doing seminars. Those are the guys that got me started, but it was really Jack that said, listen, you're a mailman. All day long, you either walk around or you drive around and you see houses. And this is back in the 80s where there were no cell phones, there was no internet. It's like the only way you had really good information was to see people's mail.
Yeah.
So, I found if you remember back in the 80s, we had the savings and loan crisis and the RTC, and it was
Yes.
kind of a smaller version of the crash that happened here 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So, here I was in the middle of that crash, and I find myself delivering certified letters, and I'd look at the return address, and it would be like from Kislak Mortgage Company or one of those other companies from back in the 80s. And I'd be delivering this certified letter to the seller and knocking on their door because that was my job. And I'd say, hi, I've got a certified letter from the mortgage company. And they look at it and they literally go, I got to get rid of this house. Do you know anybody who wants to buy this house? Because we were in a bad time back in the 80s. The market had crashed.
Yeah.
And people were going into foreclosure left and right. And the only one that knew about that when the certified letter went out was the mailman, because I got to deliver it, and the bank because they weren't getting their payment, the seller because they couldn't make their payment.
Wow.
So, I mean, of course, when it hits the Liz Pendens list or notice and default list, well, then everybody knows about it. All the investors know about it. But I got to see the problem before it became a problem. And back in those days, there was a lot of mortgages around with no due on sale clauses. So I would just be like, hey, don't give your house back to the bank. Just give me your coupon book and let me take over your payments from here. And I'll help you save your credit. So it was kind of a win-win. And that's how I got started.
Wow, that's amazing. You essentially had probably a 30 or maybe even 45-day head start right before something would hit the NOD
Yeah,
list.
easy. Yeah.
That's
Because,
amazing.
the first month I noticed a pattern. The first month they send you a letter and they say, hey, it's a late payment, right?
Yep.
We didn't get your payment. And then if they don't get it after 60 days, then it's like they send out a certified letter and say, hey, we didn't get your payment. If you don't catch up these last 2 months, we're going to have to file foreclosure proceedings. And then, 90 to 120 days, that's when the poop hits the fan and the case gets filed, and which generates the Liz Pendens and the complaint.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so we're in I like to say I was in the right place at the right time, and I did that all on your government dollars, by the way.
Well, you did your job, and you happen to make a little extra money along the way. That's okay.
Exactly.
That's amazing. So I'm curious. Were you just being a landlord then? So you take over their payments. Would they leave, or would you kind of lease it back, or how would that all work?
No, I was discouraged in the beginning about doing a sale leaseback situation because there was actually a couple of court cases that popped up that were able to construe that as a very high interest rate loan with a
usury and all that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So we just had a mutual agreement that, they would leave and that I would, catch up a payment or two. And a lot of times I wasn't really giving them anything for their equity. I was just, taking over. Now, in all honesty, there wasn't really a lot of equity there.
Right.
I mean, hey, like in this crash we had 10 years ago, I had properties I bought in the 80s that were all of a sudden back to 80s pricing. I don't know.
It was
if you're
pretty
in
bad.
the hardest hit area, but I'll tell you, South Florida took a shellacking on that one. It's almost back to where it was.
Yeah.
But
yeah, we're still where I live is 50% above the peak of 08, very unhealthy, but where I invest is about 25% under the peak. So much safer place to keep my investments.
I'd say that's probably where we're at, 25% under the peak.
Yeah, that's very good. So I'm curious about the volume so again, so they were leaving kind of cash for keys kind of thing. Hey, make up my payment. I'll leave nicely. Here's my coupon book. I'm assuming you stuck a tenant in there, or did you just try to run and sell it and make $5,000? How did that work back in the 80s?
In fact, I like to say I almost started kind of backwards in this business because, Jack and John, these guys are all about buy and hold.
Oh yeah, for
And
sure.
I mean, I didn't sell anything. Literally, the first 16 years, I was a mailman for 16 years before I quit my job at age 35. And when I quit, I had like 36 or 37 houses that were all on my mail routes. And I was managing all the properties myself. And it got to a point where I'd pull up in the mail truck and the tenant would run out and say, "Oh, Tom, I got your rent." And they'd start peeling off $100 bills on the hood of the Jeep. And I'd be like, "Don't do that.
Not right here.
Not right here, right now. This looks like a drug deal going down." But I woke up a couple mornings really stressed, and my wife had already quit the job. I was just trying to find something to fill her position. And
Yeah.
And she said, "You got to quit that stupid job. Get the heck out of there. You got more important things to do." So that's when I quit my job. And then once I had my daytimes available, my attitude was like, I don't even want another buy and hold property. I'm done there. We're just going to wait 30 years for these properties to grow up, and eventually the tenants will pay off the mortgages.
Yeah.
So I started going into fix and flipping once I had my daytimes available to me.
That makes sense. Yeah. It's funny. We did the same thing, right? We were all buy and hold for 15 years, rode the wave up to '08, did a bunch of 1031 exchanges. But then once I exited at 45. So a decade after you, it's like, well, my days are free. I should start, I should do 2 to 3 flips every, 90 days or so. Just because you have the knowledge, right? You see the value. Yeah. So it's fun. So you were adding, just to round up the 80 story. So you got to 37, I think you said. So it's like 5 or 6 a year, kind of during the crash of the
No, it was crash? Really over there. I had a goal for 3 a year.
Okay.
It was really just about 3 houses a year. And some year that we had 2 boys along the way, and I wanted to keep everything in balance with my family. I'm still working a full 8-hour job. I'd say the biggest blessing for me that was kind of hidden and unique to me was, I didn't have to pay for gasoline all day long. I just drove for $1. And by the way, working on the beach, I mean, that was fun for the first few years, watching girls in bikinis until I got married,
Yeah.
like another 19 or 20-year-old might do. But once I got out of that mode, I said, you know what, I'm just gonna bid on routes, because I don't know if you know how mailmen work, but the more seniority you have, you actually bid on your desired territory. Okay. So I was like, okay, well, where's bread and butter homes that John Schaub or Jack Miller would buy?
That's awesome.
And I just got away from the beaches and started bidding on the neighborhoods where, the average blue collar worker would live. And I knew I could relate to them. And, back in the 80s, I'd say the price ranges of those houses were like 50 to 75,000. And those grew up to be, back in the peak, like literally $300,000 houses.
Yeah.
And then they reset, and now I'd say, as you mentioned, they're probably back up to 25% or 75% of what their highest value was in the peak.
I'm curious, just because we have the time horizon with you, share with us kind of what they rented for in the 80s, maybe every 5 or 6 years. Because what I want people to hear, and if it's not true, it's not true, but I'm assuming rents went up. So why don't we because again, the longer you hold them and you let them pay off, not only does your net worth go up, but your income goes up. So why don't we talk about where rents started and maybe where they were in '08 and then maybe where they are now?
Sure. At least in my area, because remember, there are no national markets. There's only local markets.
Amen.
Really, in reality, right?
Yep.
So in my local market, I would say throughout the 80s and 90s, it was always pretty true that it was about 1% of what the house would cost. So if it was a $75,000 house, I could rent it for $750 a month.
Okay.
And then when it grew up to be a $150,000 house, I could rent it for about $1,400 a month. And there's a diminishing rate of drop off in rent, the higher in value you start to go. But one thing I'll say in this day and age now is those same houses that we bought back in the 80s, man, their rents right now, the average market rent for, I'd say, a 1,200 square foot, 3-bedroom, doesn't even have to be a 2-bath, could be a 3-1 without a garage, is about $1,600 to $1,800 a month.
Wow.
And if I put that on Section 8, our Section 8 program here is wild. It's about on average $300 to $500 more than it is on regular market rents.
That's amazing. Yeah. Same in my market. A lot of people I talk to around the country are kind of, I think it's they don't understand Section 8. Maybe they hear the horror stories that are often talked about. I'm a huge fan of Section 8, the program, what it's trying to do. But also, at least in my market, and it sounds like yours, they set the rate for much of my market, right? They're probably $200 to $300 higher than a cash paying tenant in most of my market. You know, so again, a huge thumbs up for that. So
yeah, I could talk all day about Section 8. I understand that the ins and outs of that program, and they literally just handed out a new fair market rent schedule, they call it.
Yep, I got it too. Yep.
What's funny about this in my area is if it's a 3-bedroom, it doesn't delineate whether it's a mobile home or whether it's a like cinder block house.
Yeah,
it's just a 3-bedroom. They're both on the same rent schedule.
Yeah.
So I could take a 3-bedroom mobile home that you pay $60,000 for, and I could rent it for $1,800 a month.
Not a bad deal. Yeah. All day long, right, Tom? All day long.
Yeah.
Give me all those you can.
Right.
That's amazing. So let's just close it out because on this, just because I'm interested. I'm a huge Section 8 fan. I assume you are, but I don't want to. I'll let you talk about it. Are you a fan? You're not? Upside, downside? Why don't you share your experience with Section 8?
I think it's good. I have one tenant. I just today got a notice of non-renewal that she's moving on because her kids got older, so her voucher got stepped down to a 2-bedroom, and she can't stay in my 3-bedroom any longer. But she's been with me for 16 years.
Wow.
And you know, Section 8 tenants, you know, I mean, I take good care of them, and they get to know me for that. You know, they know I'm a fair landlord. I'm good to them. I don't treat them like, you know, they're any less than people like you and I, right? I'm really nice and gracious to them in every way. And I maintain the houses. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is a Section 8 tenant, because every dollar is so valuable in their monthly budget, it takes money to move.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it takes money to get, you know, put up deposits elsewhere, to get a moving van, to, you know, to move to another location. So tenants don't, Section 8 tenants, they don't have the money to move. They'll just stay put. And if you're fair with them and you provide them good, clean housing and you fix stuff as it pops up on the Section 8 inspection that needs to be repaired, then you fix it. And not once in 16 years did I go in there and paint the interior walls. Not once did I go in there and change the carpeting or have to upgrade the kitchen.
Yeah.
So now when they leave, we're definitely going to have to do all that.
Well, 16 years, you would have to do that for anybody.
Just want to buy anyone out there want to buy some 16-year-old used carpet? I mean, there's some sunlight left in it. But that's, I mean, but the point is they stay put for a long, long time.
Yep.
And they don't move around a lot if you take good care of me and just fix stuff. And if they break stuff that's their responsibility, remember, it's their responsibility to fix their stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, I mean, a screen is just all of a sudden missing. Well, hey, it was there when it was initially inspected, so that's the tenant's responsibility.
Amen. Yeah, that's great. Oh, this has been so much fun. I'm curious where you're going to take this thing. So where we go next on these interviews is look out 3 to 5 years. You know, what does 3 to 5 years look like for Tom? Are you just living on a cruise ship somewhere? Are you still doing deals? What does it look like for you?
Well, that's really interesting. We right now that I see like some of these mobile homes that come with the land, right now I see the market as being at another peak, at least where I am in my market.
Yep.
And I see it's a good time to get back to cash again, because I think cash is going to be king when we kind of figure out where this market is going. And if anyone's watched the market, again, I'll speak for my own market. If anyone's been watching over the last quarter, they know that when the prime bumped up around September, a half a point or so, and the mortgage interest rates went up, it really kind of put the brakes on our market. And I know the higher end from 800 to 1.5, that market has definitely
it's
back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, put the brakes on. We do have a lot of high-priced houses here, you know, because we're in a beach and sun and sand area.
Yeah.
But I would say the houses that are from like 4 to 700 are still moving pretty good, but they're not like raising their prices a lot. And the properties that are priced under 400,000 are still moving along pretty good.
Okay.
So
What's the median? Because my opinion is anything that's 50% above the median is in trouble. And then anything sort of 75% of the median is fine. It's like not affected. So I don't know what the median is in your market. Do you know?
yeah, I'll tell you, like here in the Boca Raton area, the medium's 400.
Okay. So it seems like it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's 400,000, and it doesn't buy you much house. My son just bought a house about 7 or 8 months ago, and we beat up on the seller all we could, and we were only able to get him down to like 315, and it's only like a 1,300 square foot house with a small double garage. Not a big house at all, and we wound up having to put another 70 grand into it to bring it up to the condition that he wanted into. So, you know, I guess what I'm saying is that's becoming the norm here in this
Okay.
Fort Lauderdale, Boca Raton, Palm Beach area.
Okay. So you're going to be taking some chips off the table, going to cash, because I think what you're saying is you're seeing an event or some timing in the future where you're going to be able to deploy that cash in a more effective way.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I see that. I wish I had all that cash available in the last downturn because we didn't know how much it was going to correct.
Yeah.
And I got a couple of my friends that did really well in the defaulted second mortgage market. So, you know, I might take a look at the paper market when the opportunity presents itself in the next downturn. And I'm not saying the sky's falling, but I think we'll know about this slowdown that we've experienced the last 3 or 4 months because that little bump in the prime we just talked about was, you know, followed by the holidays. And I think by the end of the first quarter of 19, we'll know really where the market's headed.
Well, yeah, even if it's not now, right? You've been doing this since the 80s. I started in 2000. Real estate has a cycle, right? I hope it never has the kind of crash that we had in 08 again, but there was the savings and loan crash. There was the oil thing in Texas, right? Real estate does have a cycle or a rhythm. And if you're paying attention, you usually can get out ahead of it, i.e. go to cash, and you know when to start. You know, you never can pick a bottom or a top, but you can guess which way the arrow is going. So makes a lot of sense.
Well, what I do remember from the last reset in 07 and 08 was, you know, the properties that I paid $50,000 for, and I realized now there were 200 and then went back down to 50. That was a really humbling experience. It's like anytime you got $1 million in your hand, just close your hand, you know? I mean,
take it off the table.
I know. Don't let it get away from you. Let that be a lesson to everyone listening or watching is if you got $1 million in your hand, close your hand. I mean,
I love that.
Something stupid could happen. You never know. Now, of course, that can create another opportunity. And you and I certainly both know a lot of people who only got into this business in the last 10 years, and they've been riding a steady stream up of a market that overcorrected, in my opinion. It shouldn't have sold as cheap as it did. And they were just, hey, there's, you know, beginner's luck about just being in the right place at the right time. And a lot of guys like me, all of a sudden and I'll tell you right now, it wasn't all like peaches and cream and rainbows. I mean, I had a lot of sleepless nights when you realize, wow, you've got several $1 million of loans you're paying. And all of a sudden the equity's gone from it. Where did it go? I didn't do anything wrong. You know, why me? And, you know, hey, it was rough. But, you know, if you hang in there, you know, it fixes itself because, like you said, it does go in a lot of times 10-year cycles. So,
yeah, the one thing I want to touch on there. So we see the same thing. You know, your net worth went down, but at least in my case, my income went up because my occupancies went up and my rents went up because more people had to rent. So, you know, as long as my debt was fixed and didn't have, you know, due on or, you know, balloon payments, I was good. But I want to talk about people who started in the last 5 years. Because especially fix and flippers, I've been trying to warn them to go to more cash or have less inventory because I think they've all been rewarded because they've been lucky, right? They've been going into a huge seller's market where if a a project lasted an extra 60 days, they actually made money. And I think the market we're rolling into, that's not the case. An extra 60 days is going to cost you money. So you see it the same way. And if so, kind of any words of wisdoms you have for the flippers maybe getting started or trying to load up now?
Yeah, I see the only way to remedy that is be careful when you're buying it from wholesalers, because what somebody considers a wholesale deal, a lot of times it's a new investor getting into the market who doesn't really know what a deal is to start with.
Yeah.
So they may get something under contract, but if they get it under contract at 75 or 80 cents on the dollar, you have like zero room for a mistake when it pops up.
And they do.
And
Yep.
we have a property that's closing next week that a mistake popped up last week, and the mistake was the whole house needs to be redone with electricity. And our first estimate on that was $15,600. Well, if you're buying on a tight margin and there's not an extra $15,600 in that deal, you're in trouble. The reason this is okay for us is because we have it under contract right now for $142,000, and we paid $46,000 for it, and it only needed about $25,000 in repairs. So I think you can only get deals that are 50 cents on a dollar, and that's like my favorite number is whatever I'll say that up to about 300,000. If you can get it for 50 cents on a dollar, then that's a good deal, providing the repairs aren't ridiculous.
Right.
Okay. Now the only way to get those kind of deals are going straight to the seller, because you're not going to find those on the MLS for the most part of it. I've always said the MLS will seek its own level, right? I mean, there's so many eyeballs on it all the time. You're only going to be able to buy it so cheap from the MLS. You got to go straight to the seller yourself and find those deals. So we're always looking for sellers that either have a strong reason to sell the property or that have a hard deadline that they have to sell by. And that's your best deal.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Well, this has been so much fun for me. I want to make sure we close out and sort of turn the channel over to you and, just share what you'd like, how to get a hold of you, your coaching, whatever you'd like. Why don't you go ahead and just share away?
Sure. Probably the best way to find me is my name's Tom Nardone, and MillionaireMailman.com is my website. So if you go to MillionaireMailman.com, I just wrote a new ebook, and you can download a copy of that ebook, and you can read that. It pretty much lays out our marketing plan that we have right now. So that's a valuable resource. Just go ahead and grab it, and it'll help you in whatever market you're at. So that is that's pretty much the one resource I have right now is that book and my website if you want to find out more about me.
Very cool. This has been, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. I was just going to add probably my outlook for 2019 is one thing I see right now is a lot of people are starving for really good quality leads. And obviously, if somebody can hand you leads that you can buy at 50 or 60 cents on a dollar, that's a valuable list. So we're working on a lead generation company for 2019 for people to be able to get leads. And we're not just selling records, we're actually going to sell the leads themselves after we've talked to the sellers in different areas. So that's something we're ramping up. It's going to take a considerable amount of manpower, but I just see a thirst in the marketplace for that right now, because especially for newbies getting started, because they don't know how to have a seller conversation and convert that lead into a contract.
Yeah.
So we're going to, that's where I see as a huge opportunity right now.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's, I think you're going to be wildly successful with that, because that is, we have lots of people that are interested, and everybody understands the closer you get to the actual seller, the better deal you can make, right? There's less people taking their little sliver. So I'm going to look forward to watching that. I'm going to go to your website now and download that ebook. I did not see that last time, so I got to go get that. I'll be very interested to see that. So I just wanted to thank you for your time. I think your story is great. I love the fact that you just used your day job to build a great portfolio. So thank you very much.
You're welcome, Michael. Thanks for having me on the show.